I was asked in the comments, how do you make a double layer beanie hat for an infant or child? And I'll show you, this is a doll that I got on Amazon that's supposed to be infant size, so we could do the sizing. And her head circumference is 14.5 inches around. And I went on to Yarn Standards website. This is a really great free resources where you can get sizing information. And it says for a baby or infant, it's between that 14 and 16 inches. So this doll should be a good size for practicing what to do for sizing. So I'm going to use the 40 needle circular knitting machine. What we're going to do is cast on at the black needle, and we need to go over and under one time around. When you go under the needle, you want to make sure it gets hooked so the needle grabs it. And then you want to all the way down into your yarn tensioner and holder. I'm using Big Twist Value brand yarn, and we are going to do 60 rows. And I've seen a lot of different tutorials about how many rows you should do for a baby size hat. And I really like 60 rows. Some will say 66, and I feel like you'd have to fold up the brim. I don't want to have to do that for a smaller child's hat, so I'm doing 6 less rows. So what we're going to do now is we're going to cast off. And you want to make sure that your tail is long. You want it to at least to go around the circumference of your machine, or you want it to be at least the length of your machine. But if you cut it too short or you run out of yarn, you can just tie on some extra yarn with a knot and then just use that to cast off, because you don't need a long tail for when your project is complete. You just need it for the cast off, and you end up cutting off most of it. So I'm just going to start I took the yarn out of the yarn holder and I start cranking it around again, and I start picking up every needle once it goes down. Sometimes you'll see people, they'll crank it once around and then pick everything up on the left side of the yarn holder. I find that I slip off extra stitches doing it that way, and then I have to try to fix the drop stitches. So I like doing it this way because it keeps the other ones more secure as I'm picking up those stitches. And if you do this little trick where you add on more yarn to cast off, you just have to feed it over that knot, but it's not a huge deal. And now we're going to take our hat and we're going to cinch it up. And again, you'll just have to move each stitch back over the knot again if you had run out of yarn. So that's why it's nice to leave yourself extra yarn, because it just makes it a little bit quicker than having to pull everything over those knots. So I'll speed this up, and once you see, after I get everything back over, and once we cinch it down tightly, everything's back onto that blue yarn. So you can see it doesn't need a lot of yarn to complete the project. You just need it to be able to take it off the machine. So now I'm just going to remove that yarn I don't need anymore. And then I'm going to make sure it's tight, and I'm going to knot it into place so none of the stitches unravel. And so I'm just going to make a little knot, and this is a pretty tiny piece of yarn, so then we're just going to go back through the loop through the back side so it doesn't fall off the needle. And now that side is secured. So now to make it a double layer, or you can make a reversible beanie hat if you did multiple colors, we are going to put the tail end of the yarn we just cinched down to the inside of the hat and pull it over to the other side of the tube. And that's how we make our 2 layers. So both tubes are now on the same side. And you just want to make sure your fabric isn't twisted at all, so the hat fits nicely on the head. And then we are going to cinch it down our other tube, keeping both of the tail ends of the yarns out. And then I like to knot them together to secure it all down and to keep the 2 layers tight together at the top of the hat. So I just make a knot. And now you can choose which side you would like to be your inside of the beanie and which one you want to be the outside. And then I'm going to put my yarn through the middle again to the inside. And then I like to weave in the yarn ends back and forth. And this just helps keep the top of the hat tightly closed where that circle is. and then it just adds extra security and strength to that top so nothing unravel or comes undone. And so I'll just sew that back and forth a few times, and I tried to catch both layers. Now that this side's done, I will put my yarn back through. If you have two longer tail yarns, it makes it really nice because you can do both sides with each tail yarn, but I only have one that's long enough. So I'm just going to feed it through back through the other side and do the same thing to make sure that stays tight, sewing it back and forth at the top. Then I knot them together a few more times. And then you can take your yarn and you can feed it through one of the layers so it's in between. And then you can just cut off any excess and it will hide in between the two layers. And so now our beanie hat is complete. So you can see this one was 60 rows versus this darker blue one, which was 66 rows. So you can see how it's a bit longer. And so this is how you can just gauge what size beanie hat you need to. Again, her head circumference was 14.5 inches, and it fits her just right where we're not having to fold up of the brim. We don't have to worry about her covering her eyes. When I did the 66, you'll see we have to fold it up or else her eyes get covered. And so the 40 needle circular knitting machine works really good for infant, toddler, up to a small child. And then the 48, you can do more child, teenager, preteen teenager, and then up to an adult size beanie hat. So thank you so much for watching, and please like and follow for more free tutorials. Happy crafting.